Welcome to GameCube Gallery, the series where we're taking a look at the GameCube library one game at a time. In the previous episode of GameCube Gallery, we took a very detailed look at Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and I will leave a link to that video in the description down below in case you missed it. In today's episode, we're taking a look at another one of my favorite GameCube games of all time, and that is Metroid Prime. The Metroid series has always been a very interesting franchise for Nintendo. It is a much darker series for them and has always been one of the more intense series from a difficulty standpoint, thus being for a more hardcore audience rather than the casual audience Nintendo typically goes for. It is a series that traditionally does not sell as well for Nintendo when compared to other franchises like Mario, Zelda, Animal Crossing, and Super Smash Bros. It all started on the NES, with Metroid being one of the games that pioneered a new genre known as the Metroidvania. It changed the gaming landscape forever, and we even got a follow-up with Metroid 2 Return of Samus, this time on the Game Boy. Then when Nintendo released the third game, Super Metroid, on the Super Nintendo, this propelled the series into new heights and showed the massive potential it had. 8 years later, in 2002 on the Game Boy Advance, we got what used to be my favorite 2D entry in the series with Metroid Fusion, which was a slight departure for the series, but in a good way. Just a quick side note, my new favorite 2D Metroid game in the series is Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch. That same year, in 2002, we got something nobody really saw coming or expected to work, and that was the first 3D game in the Metroid series called Metroid Prime. Not in my wildest dreams did I ever expect Nintendo to create a 3D Metroid game, which looking back I should have expected it considering both Mario and Zelda made the transition to 3D. Not only did I not expect it, but also I thought to myself there's absolutely no way they could translate the 2D gameplay of the Metroid series into a 3D format and it still feel and play like a Metroid game. Boy, was I wrong. Big time. Metroid Prime was released on the Nintendo GameCube on November 18th, 2002, and it is a first-person action-adventure game that takes place in the mainland Metroid series. It was of course published by Nintendo, and it was developed by Retro Studios, which at one point was one of the most talented developers out there. Retro Studios are based out of Texas, and they were founded in 1998 and have developed some of the best Nintendo first-party games, such as Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, Donkey Kong Country Returns, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and they are currently developing Metroid Prime 4 on the Nintendo Switch. With all that out of the way, let's get into the story in Metroid Prime. One thing that I absolutely love about Metroid Prime is they do not shove the story in your face. The main emphasis of the game is on exploration, action, and puzzles. The story is there in the background if you want to get into it or learn about it. There are basically no cutscenes, and there's absolutely no dialogue between any characters in the game at all, creating a real sense of isolation and loneliness. If you want to explore the story, it is primarily told through pirate data and Chozo lore, which can be found and scanned throughout the world, and small bits are told through creature scans, research scans, and other miscellaneous scans within the environments. So as you play through the game, you'll be slowly piecing together the story and the larger narrative at play. Essentially, without spoiling too much, Samus receives a distress signal from a space pirate frigate, and when she arrives, she discovers that the crew was killed by their own monstrosities they created with genetic modification. She fights one of these monstrosities at the core of the ship, and upon defeating it, the self-destruct mode of the ship activates, and as Samus escapes, her suit is damaged and she loses all of her suit upgrades. She is then attacked by Meta Ridley, and she chases the cybernetic beast to a planet called Talon 4, which is close by. As you explore the planet, you begin to learn about the ancient civilization that lived there called the Chozo and what led to their extermination and the poisoning of the planet. You also slowly uncover what the space pirates are up to on the planet as they are using this poison for their own nefarious means. Now that's all I want to say about the story at this time because I don't want to spoil it for those of you who still want to play the game. But it is a good story with plenty of depth, especially considering it is all told through information you gather organically from the planet you are exploring, and you piece it all together bit by bit in a very satisfying way. Now you might say to me, Matt, what kind of game like this doesn't have cutscenes or dialogue? Doesn't that take away from the presentation and atmosphere of the game? And I say to you, it actually does the opposite, because Samus is the only character in this story and they want you to feel that isolation, and it is done so brilliantly. Now let's change gears and talk about the graphics, animation, and performance. Metroid Prime has some of the best graphics on the GameCube, and I am not the only one that thinks so, as a simple Google search and you will see it on several lists for the best graphics on the console. Two things that make this particularly impressive is that Retro Studios was a fairly new development studio, and additionally the GameCube was only roughly 1 year old when the game was released. Typically it takes well into a generation or even towards the end for developers to put out some of the best graphics, but Retro Studios managed to do it at damn near the start, which is mind-blowing. The level of detail packed into this game is astonishing and quite frankly seems like it shouldn't have been possible. As you move through the environments, the first thing you will notice is the incredibly detailed and nuanced texture work literally everywhere you look, floor to ceiling. There are no flat textures here. You are met with an abundance of variety in both indoor and outdoor areas that will leave you breathless at times. This is a planet with an extinct civilization, so as a result you will find the flora and fauna have taken over the planet, and as you move through structures you will see plant life all around you, such as vines climbing up the walls to alien trees and shrubbery, some of which will attack you. Each main area on the planet looks thematically different from a graphical perspective. In the Talon overworld, you will mainly see dense nature and foliage. In Chozo Ruins, you will see crumbling and ruined structures taken over by nature. In Magmoor Caverns, you will see rocky caves filled with hot magma. In Phendrana Drifts, you will see enormous frozen structures covered in snow and ice. And there are many other stunning environments, both indoor and outdoor, you will uncover during your journey. The creature models are surprisingly varied and detailed, with superb animations that truly make them feel lifelike. And Metroid Prime is packed full of stunning visual effects. Everything from the snow falling in Phendrana Drifts to your various beams being fired and impacting enemies and surfaces to your missiles and bombs destroying objects, Metroid Prime is truly a feast for the eyes in all aspects. Another awesome detail I want to end this section on are the visors and visor graphical effects. When you have the thermal visor on, you will see exactly what you would expect to see with thermal vision, and it is visually striking. Then you have the X-ray visor, which I don't want to spoil, so I will leave you to discover that one on your own. In addition to that, there are various effects on the surface of your visors, such as it steaming up or rain droplets hitting it, and sometimes you can even see a partial reflection of your own face from within the visor, and these are awesome details. Metroid Prime is without a doubt one of the most visually pleasing and stunning games on the GameCube, so much so that it even holds up today, especially when played through an HD upscaler and progressive scan. Lastly, I want to say that I encountered zero performance issues during my playthrough of the game. It was as smooth as butter. Let's talk about something Metroid Prime does very well to create the perfect atmosphere, and that is the music and sound design. As I've stated before multiple times, in my opinion, the best video game music is the music that fits the game like a glove and adds to the atmosphere, and the music in Metroid Prime does that phenomenally. Metroid Prime is a very science fiction themed game involving space, planets, aliens, advanced technology, and of course the deep feeling of isolation you get from being the only character in the game, and the music captures all of these themes brilliantly. From the start of the game, when you hear the title screen track, it has a very alien sound to it while also sounding very science fiction, and then you move into the menu select track, it picks up in intensity, and these two tracks alone really set the stage for the feel and scope of Metroid Prime. When you begin the game in the distressed space pirate frigate and you hear the frigate Orpheon track, you will be met with a dark and brooding track with droning tones, and this really matches the theme of the half-destroyed ship and the devastation within. You You make your way down to the planet of Talon 4 and start exploring, and you will be met with the Talon Overworld track, which really captures the vastness of the planet and the stunning nature held within the Talon Overworld area with some very cool and epic rhythms and melodies. When you get into the Chozo ruins and hear its associated track, it just fits so well with the dilapidated and crumbling ruins you will be exploring, and it also has an air of mystery to it. One of my favorite areas in the game also features one of my favorite tracks, and that is Magmoor Caverns. This track sets an epic tone within the first 15 seconds and really fits the cave and lava settings of Magmoor Caverns. The Phendrana Drifts track has a sort of bright and magical sound to it that matches the bright and snowy environment of the drifts. Lastly, on the music, two more of my favorite tracks I want to share include the Phazon Mine track and the Versus Meta Ridley track. Here, have a quick listen. The sound design in Metroid Prime is incredible as you would expect, and it enhances the atmosphere in a huge degree. You'll hear a variety of sounds from the creatures you will face to the sounds in the background of the environment to gameplay cues. It is all done so brilliantly and organically to enhance not only the isolated atmosphere but also the gameplay as well. So I have absolutely zero complaints about the music and sound design in Metroid Prime. It is some of the best on the GameCube in my opinion. Now let's talk about what I feel are the two most important things in a video game, and that is the gameplay and fun factor. So what is a Metroid game supposed to play like? Essentially, you start the game damn near powerless and only able to explore a small portion of the map until you start to obtain your suit upgrades. As you acquire your suit upgrades, you will be able to explore more and more new areas of the map, as well as find secrets, power-ups, and upgrades in older areas of the map. So by the end of the game, once you have found all the suit upgrades, you should be able to explore every nook and cranny and 100% the game if you choose to. So this is basically what a Metroidvania is, and it has been the formula that the Metroid series has followed from the very beginning, and well, Metroid Prime maintains this formula and gameplay loop while making the transition to 3D while also still feeling and playing like a 2D Metroid game in many ways, and it is incredibly impressive. You almost don't feel like you're playing a 3D game at all. It's kind of hard to explain. The controls are perfect, which is interesting considering it doesn't have dual analog controls like a typical first-person shooter, which makes sense because, make no mistake, Metroid Prime is not a first-person shooter, it is a first-person action-adventure game. So you move with the left stick, and if you want to aim freely, you hold down R, and with L you can lock on to enemies for targeting, and while you're locked on you can strafe around them to dodge attacks as you decimate them with your beams and missiles. You switch visors with the D-pad, switch beams with the C-stick, Y button for missiles, X for morph ball, A for beam attacks, and B for jump. The controls are simple and effective, and they just work, and they work very well. Metroid Prime has some incredibly fun suit upgrades to find as well that all play into exploration, puzzle solving, and combat. You have your suit upgrades like the Various suit, which allows you to explore very hot environments, and the Gravity suit, which allows you to move freely underwater. You have your beams like the Wave beam, which can be used to power up objects, the Ice beam, which can be used to freeze enemies, and the super powerful Plasma beam, which can melt ice, and all four beams are effective against various enemies and used in progression and puzzle solving. All four beams also have a powered up blast that utilizes missiles, and each one feels different, and it is typically devastating against enemies and bosses. Then you have the four visors, being your combat visor, the scan visor, the thermal visor, and the x-ray visor. The combat visor is simply what you use as you're blasting away at enemies. The scan visor allows you to scan the objects, the environment, the enemies to learn more about the world, the story, and the potential weakness of enemies and bosses, and most of this this information is cataloged in your logbook, which counts towards 100% completion. The thermal visor allows you to track heat signatures of enemies in different parts of the environment. And lastly, the X-ray visor allows you to see through walls and see invisible objects and enemies. Then you have your morph ball abilities, and for those of you who do not know, the morph ball allows you to transform into a ball and squeeze into small areas. You have your morph ball bombs, which allow you to blow up certain objects and enemies, as well as use the blast to make your morph ball jump in the air. The boost ball allows you to move with great speed while in morph ball mode, which allows you to traverse half pipes and activate some mechanisms and just traverse the world faster. Power bombs are incredibly powerful bombs that allow you to blow up certain structures and absolutely decimate enemies and bosses. And lastly, the spider ball ability allows you to attach to magnetic trikes to reach new areas and power-ups. Then you have a few miscellaneous suit upgrades like the space jump, which allows you to double jump, and the grapple beam, which allows you to, well, grapple. And the main upgrade collectible is of course your missile expansions and energy tanks, and there are also a few power bomb expansions to find as well. You will use all of these weapons and abilities as you explore the game's massive world, which is split up into 7 distinct areas that are absolutely packed full of secrets in almost every single room. Each area features unique enemies, obstacles, and challenges, and there is a surprising amount of platforming and verticality to some of the areas. And the platforming in Metroid Prime feels great, which is shocking because typically in a first-person game, platforming is very hard to do. Exploration is an absolute joy, and Metroid Prime does not hold your hand at all, and it respects your skills as a gamer, but the main tools that aid you in exploration are your map and your scan visor. Your 3D map is incredibly useful in figuring out where to explore and go next, and sometimes your ship will send you scans that tell you exactly where your next objective is, and it is up to you to figure out how to get there. Your scan visor will provide you with useful information that can help in locating all the deviously hidden secrets and upgrades. One gripe I have, however, is that unlike in most 2D Metroid games, your map doesn't show you which rooms contain upgrades, but you will know you are close to one because you will hear sort of a droning noise as you get closer. But it is almost impossible to keep track of what upgrades you have and have not collected unless you physically make notes, and you shouldn't have to do that. The puzzles are very well crafted, and some of them are just devious, which I appreciate. Combat is a blast, and the enemy variety is insane. You will fight creatures of all shapes and sizes, including the dreaded Metroid and space pirates, which are some of the hardest enemies in the game, especially when you reach the Phazon mine area, which is just brutal at times. There are also a few mini bosses that are a lot of fun, but I found myself wishing there were more than just a few. Same with the boss fights, they're only a handful, but holy shit, they are epic and a blast, and almost like a puzzle to figure out their weaknesses at times. Some boss fights like the Omega Pirate are just brutal until you get their pattern down, and the final boss against Metroid Prime is an extreme difficulty spike that some players never overcome, sadly. Speaking of difficulty, Metroid Prime is certainly not an easy game, and you absolutely have to get down the controls and mechanics if you are to have a fighting chance, but it isn't impossible either. With the exception of a few difficulty spikes, I felt like it was fair. The only major issue I have with Metroid Prime is what is essentially a fetch quest you start to encounter about midway through the game that you have to complete in order to beat the game. Essentially, you have to find these 12 artifacts scattered around the world, and some of them are very well hidden, and well, this really sort of bogs down the game and slows it down at the end, which hurts the excellent pacing for me. It kind of reminds me of the Wind Waker when you have to track down the Triforce shards. It just ruins the pacing in the end game. But other than that, I really think the gameplay in Metroid Prime is almost perfect. From the combat to the exploration to the puzzle solving, it all comes together in perfect harmony to create a cohesive Metroid experience that is an absolute joy to play. Metroid Prime is a pretty beefy game too, with the main story coming in at around 14 hours on average, and a completionist run is going to take you around 18 hours. But the real mind-blowing thing is that the fastest speed run for an any percentage completion is 45 minutes, which just blows my mind. So let's move on to my conclusion and some other miscellaneous information about Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime is an incredible story that is told in an organic way that you could completely ignore if you want, as it is not shoved in your face. And the way the story is presented helps to add to the tremendous feeling of isolation and loneliness in the game. The graphics and animation are easily some of the best on the GameCube, with tons of detailed textures, creature models, and stunning visual effects, and this is all the more impressive coming from a new studio and this early in the GameCube's lifespan. The music and sound design is masterfully done and enhances and adds to into the science fiction and isolation themes of the game in an absolutely brilliant way that brings the atmosphere together. The gameplay is full of variety with tons of amazing suit upgrades, with an enormous world to explore full of secrets and a metric shit ton of enemies to fight, and of course epic bosses. They managed to capture the essence of a 2D Metroid game perfectly in the 3D format, and I truly think that Metroid Prime is one of the best games on the GameCube, and it is a must own and a must play for all GameCube owners. And I'm not the only one in my thinking, as on Metacritic the average critic score is 97 out of 100 with a whopping 70 critic reviews, making it one of the highest rated games on Metacritic, and the average user score is 8.9 out of 10 with a whopping 1,312 user ratings. Metroid Prime is considered to be one of the best games on the GameCube, especially from a first-party exclusive standpoint. This shows in the sales, as it sold relatively well for a Metroid game, especially with it being the first 3D game in the series. In North America, it sold around 1.96 million units and around 2.82 million units total worldwide. It's still a fairly common game to get, but it is slowly inching over into the uncommon territory, and the price is going to keep going up, as at the time of this recording, price charting shows the average loose price at around $24, the average complete price at around $38, and the average new price at around $411. I am seeing current eBay listings for around $45 complete with shipping, and I am seeing recent eBay sold listings for around $55 complete with shipping. Needless to say, Metroid Prime is going to be a game that will continue to increase in price as time goes on, and it will become harder and harder to find, like most GameCube games, so I recommend picking up a copy while it is still relatively affordable. The last few things I want to mention before we close out the video is that if you have a Wii or a Wii U, you can also play Metroid Prime via the Metroid Prime trilogy on the Wii, and the Wii version features motion aiming, which works great, as well as some other new features. Lastly, there have been strong rumors lately that suggest Nintendo is working on either a remake or a remaster for Metroid Prime on the Nintendo Switch, which would make sense considering Metroid Prime 4 is in the works, so hopefully that comes out sometime in 2022, or we get some news on it in the near future. Well, there you have it, folks. GameCube Gallery on Metroid Prime. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure and hit that like button. I really appreciate you tuning in. It means a lot. If you've played Metroid Prime, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Also, let me know in the comments down below if there are any games you recommend that I cover in a future episode of GameCube Gallery. As always, folks, I appreciate you tuning into the channel. Stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I will catch you all in the next video. Later.